Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Grab your notebooks because if you're a Spanish-speaking CS grad stepping into a high-stakes commercial data science role, today's session is absolutely critical for you. We're going to master the vocabulary of database tables. Because this isn't just about knowing how to write SQL, it's about the exact language you use to say what a row actually represents, where rows come from, and how to communicate perfectly when things go wrong. Let's get to work.
Let's kick things off with a classic nightmare scenario. You're on the job, right? You join a table of orders to a table of line items, you sum up the revenue, and boom, the total comes out exactly triple what the finance department is reporting, literally 3 times higher.
And then your manager looks right at you and says, "Walk me through what you check." Talk about pressure. Surviving a moment like this doesn't just take technical chops. It takes incredibly precise English vocabulary to walk them through your troubleshooting step by step. But don't worry, we're building that exact toolkit today. You can definitely do this.
Section 1, the language of tables, building your detective toolkit.
Okay, the absolute most important word in your data dictionary, it's grain. The grain is simply what one row of a result represents. You've got to always check your grain. Honestly, if you can't say the grain out loud, you absolutely cannot say whether your final number is right. So how does a native speaker actually use this on the job? Well, every aggregation changes the grain, right? A seasoned data scientist might say, after the group by, the grain is 1 row per league, not 1 row per striker. See how that works? It brilliantly illustrates how clearly you need to communicate exactly what happens to your rows after a transformation.
Which brings us to our next crucial term, and it's a big one, to fan out. A query fans out when a join multiplies rows because one row on the left matched many on the right. Your row count blows up, it fans out. And the crazy part? It does it without throwing any errors whatsoever.
And this is exactly what creates that triple revenue nightmare we opened with. You might hear a colleague warn, "Careful, joining orders to line items will fan out, and then every revenue figure you compute is wrong." Because once it fans out, none of that revenue is cleanly attributable to a single order anymore. It just silently doubles or triples your totals.
So how do we actually investigate this missing or mismatched data? Well, we use an anti-join. An anti-join is a query that returns the rows that failed to match. While a normal join asks what matched, an anti-join asks what didn't. It's literally the perfect tool to find orphans, like sales with no customer, or goals that apparently belong to nobody.
Now, a really common way we map data is by using a lookup table. It maps a code, like a country code, to its human-readable meaning. And a quick pro tip for you here, always remember to filter first. Filter your data to keep only the rows that meet a condition, ditch the rest, and then join to your lookup tables. Remember, filter first, aggregate second.
Section 2. When queries fail silently. The invisible traps in your database.
All right, we have to start by clearing up a massive point of confusion. There are 2 completely unrelated meanings for the word normalize. To normalize a database means storing each fact exactly once. But to normalize statistics, that means dividing by exposure, like goals per 90 minutes, just to make things comparable. Same spelling, totally unrelated jobs. Make sure you never mix these up. So, why do we bother normalizing databases in the first place? It's to prevent the update anomaly. This happens when a fact is copied across a bunch of rows and somebody updates only some of them. Suddenly, your database holds contradictory answers. Just think about it. 30 copies of a founding year is basically 29 chances to disagree with yourself. Next up is a concept called 3-valued logic. In SQL, a condition evaluates to true, false, or unknown. That's 3-valued logic. And this is exactly why comparing anything to null matches absolutely nothing, instead of raising a syntax error. If you write where club equals null, it won't crash, it just won't work. The correct phrasing is null. And that leads us directly to a truly terrifying concept, failing silently. When a query fails silently, it produces a wrong result, with no error, no warning, just perfectly clean-looking output. This is hands down the most expensive failure mode in analytics, because absolutely nothing tells you to look for a problem. You just end up handing the wrong numbers straight to the CEO. Let's do a rapid-fire drill of some core commercial vocabulary. First up, churn is customers leaving, while its exact opposite is retention. Next, we contrast OLTP for small live transactions versus OLAP for massive analytical queries. Third, an endpoint is a single URL doing one specific job. Then to replicate is to reproduce a result independently. Fifth, attributable means something can be credited to a specific cause. And finally, a proxy is something you can measure that stands in for something you actually care about. Definitely study this list.
Section 3. ESL Corner. Spanish Traps. Correcting native translation patterns. First up is the embedded question trap. Now, a standalone question inverts, right? What is grain? But the second that question sits inside a bigger sentence, it stops behaving like a question and takes normal statement order. So you don't say, I don't understand what is grain. You absolutely must say, I don't understand what grain is. In Spanish, it inverts in both cases, which is exactly why the mistake feels so natural to make. But take your time and practice that English order. Next, let's look at a super common trap, but luckily a really easy fix. Vocabulary is an uncountable noun in English. It represents the entire body of words. Because of that, it takes much, never many. Saying too many vocabulary is incorrect. You gotta say too much vocabulary. Or if you really want to count them, just switch the noun and say too many words. Finally, let's tackle the preposition rule. In English, verbs take the ing form after any preposition. So it's a probability of ending in a goal. Spanish uses the plain infinitive after prepositions, like la probabilidad de terminar, which is why using the plain infinitive in English feels so right to you. But we've got to break that habit. After a preposition in English, always use ing. Section 4. The perfect interview answer. Solving the triple revenue bug. All right, here is the shape of a perfect interview answer. Step 1, you state the grain. And be bold about this. Once you confidently say, after that join, it's 1 row per line item, not 1 row per order. The bug has nowhere left to hide. Step 2, check the row counts, because you probably suspect the join has fanned out and failed silently. And step 3, while you're in there, run an anti-join to check the opposite direction for missing orders or line items that point to nothing. So the crucial takeaway from our explainer today comes down to 3 core concepts: grain, fan out, and fail silently. Master them, and you master the table. But I want to leave you with one final, kind of provocative thought. If finance's number is already the one that leadership trusts, does having the perfect SQL query even matter if you lack the exact English words to prove why your data is right? Think about that before your next interview. Master these words, and you'll absolutely master the table. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.